Yo, Big D back with a Thursday episode of the Big D podcast. Before I bring in today's special guest, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. See all my content. Back at it today, so happy about that. Also, check out the Big D podcast for all your audio listeners on Spotify and Apple. So, joining us from the great Northwest today, my friend, a writer with the NFL writer with the what is it? The league writers or league winners, like one of those
Yep.
89
Mm-hmm.
nine NFL websites today. Jesse Moeller. So Jesse, you, Jesse, how far are you from me? Are you like as far away as you could be without me being in Miami, right?
I'm pretty close to the border. I'm about 2 hours from the Canada America border. So I'm about 30 minutes south of Seattle, give or take. So I could basically make it to Canada in about 2.5 hours. So I'm pretty far away, you could say that.
And I could make it to Miami in about 2.5, 3 hours, give or take traffic, which there always is traffic in my neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So, about 4 or 5 weeks from out from the NFL draft in Kansas City, and boy, every conversation I hear about the draft is on quarterbacks, quarterbacks, quarterbacks. And I thought this year's draft class wasn't about quarterbacks. I thought next year's draft class would be the one that we talk about Caleb Williams from SC or Drake May from UNC.
Yeah, like we have some guys that we've been talking about for a while in CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. They've been known quantities that people love. They're Caleb Williams is kind of this he's what they call the generational prospect, right? Where it was with Trevor Lawrence a couple like 2 years ago, where everyone was like, you got to get this guy no matter what. So we will probably see this year a couple teams tanking just to get their hands on Caleb Williams, but they're still basically top four. And if you want to include Hendon Hooker, it's a top five, but he's older. He's 25, has an ACL injury, so his draft stock's all over the place. But you're going to see four quarterbacks in the first round, which is pretty exciting because it's first round quarterbacks, so your team's investing. And it just depends on if you want to take the ticket on Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, and they're the mystery boxes. CJ Stroud is basically he's a lock for the first pick at this point. I think the betting odds have him pushing close to like negative 400. So it feels like everyone's on board with that. And then it just depends on if Houston takes Bryce Young, which they should. And then we'll get to my Seahawks and who knows what they're going to do. But yeah, it's gonna be really fun with these quarterbacks this year.
So let's talk about these guys. CJ Stroud from Ohio State, Bryce Young from Alabama, Anthony Richardson from Florida, and Will Levis from Kentucky. Start with the guy you have at the top of the list. I don't care. It could be any one of them.
So if it was fantasy, it's a different game. But if I'm taking the real life quarterback, I am for my franchise to start. I'm either deciding between Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. Um, I don't want to do what Carolina did, where they put this massive investment in draft capital in the position, and it just outright fails because then you're screwed for like 5 years trying to fix that position. So they're probably going to go the safer route, take Stroud, but he offers pretty much everything you could ask for. He's a pinpoint passer. He processes well. I know people have issues with Ohio State quarterbacks dating back through the years, but CJ Stroud is a very good quarterback, and you see it even at the combine where he was just. I think it was McShay and Daniel Jeremiah were like, "This is the best passing display I've seen in like the last 10 years." Where it was perfect, right on the money with guys he's never thrown to before either. These are just guys at the combine, and he hit him in stride perfectly, and then he launches a 60-yard bomb just for fun. So he seems like the safest. I'd say Bryce Young has been the best quarterback the last 2 years at Alabama. The things he's done is just remarkable. You can see clips of him on Twitter or YouTube or anywhere, and you see these moves he makes. It's kind of similar to Russell Wilson, where he's able to evade because he's smaller and still diagnose hit a guy on stride 45 yards downfield. So either one of those guys, I'd honestly be very happy with my team take.
Who does CJ Stroud remind you of? Because I've heard people compare Bryce Young with Pat Mahomes, but yet I think he's more Russell Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
5'10", good runner, can escape the pocket, but but hugely accurate, which you have to be at somebody that's small. I mean, we saw what Drew Brees did with the Chargers and Saints, and you were a first-hand witness for what Russ did for a decade. But
Mm-hmm.
who does CJ Stroud remind you of?
So you'll hear a lot of names where it's Jared Goff or Teddy Bridgewater, but with better arm strength. And I know that kind of gives people question marks like, why would you take this guy? But he doesn't have the elite arm where he makes up for it as everywhere else. He doesn't have a bad arm either. It's not like it's a deficiency, but he does things really well. He's like you saw it in the national championship game against Georgia, or sorry, the semifinal against Georgia, where he was just playing out of his mind, and he was basically carrying that team because Georgia is an incredible team, and we saw them against TCU what they did. But he's able to just go through his progressions, find the guy, and hit them perfectly. And you'll see this with particularly Marvin Harrison Jr., who's going to be someone we're talking about extensively next year. But he sets all of his players up to win. So he's the ideal point guard. He knows the play, he diagnoses it, he gets it out in time where he makes his wide receivers look good. And that's what you want to see from a quarterback. He doesn't have to do everything where he has to, you know, scramble. He's not very much than that type of player. But from an actual processing and the prototypical thrower of the ball, he's very good at what he does.
And I think what that Georgia game showed from Stroud is that he could run because everybody's wondering, is CJ Stroud just a passer or a dual threat option? That game against Georgia showed Stroud can be a runner.
Yeah, he doesn't do it often, but he kind of, which is nice to see. He more does it to the fact of like to keep the play alive. He's not gonna really take off to run unless he has to, but he can move around the pocket. It's kind of like pocket mobility, which you saw Tom Brady do this for 20 plus years, where the pocket mobility is fantastic, where you think you're gonna get him, but he just shifts up or moves up in the pocket and hits the guy, and the defender is just so frustrated because they can't touch him.
Yeah, even back in the day, like Dan Marino was not going to win a 40-yard dash, but yet nobody could sack him because his feet were so elusive in the pocket, even though it didn't seem like Marino's feet would be that quick.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, Bryce Young feels, I mean, I think if Bryce Young were like 6'3", 220 instead of 5'10", 195, he'd be number one, no questions asked, because what is there not to like except that he's maybe a little small?
Right. That's the thing. People hate small, as they call them, small boys, but particularly at the quarterback position. And you see, like that's part of the reason CJ Stroud gets the boost because the connection with Frank Reich, like, he's always had these monster quarterbacks, these guys that stand in the pocket that are big, are able to take hits. Like if you look back at all the guys they had, Matt Ryan, big quarterback, and Philip Rivers, another big quarterback. Like these guys through the years, and Andrew Luck, he was a giant quarterback. But like that's kind of the prototypical quarterback. So if you get someone who's 5'10", and I know he weighed in at 204, I think it was, but people think it's water weight. So he's really small. He's not as athletic as Kyler either. So there is kind of a worry because he's not as like built as thick as he is. Like, can he stand up to a punishment? But he played in the SEC and dominated for 2 years. And like I know there's a greater chance of injury just because he's smaller and he'll take a bigger punishment, but he's he's passed every test you want. So if I had the choice and say if Bryce Young was 6'3", 220, like he would be consensus number one. But people hate the small guys, so we'll see how it shakes out.
I mean, Drew Brees is going to be in the Hall of Fame. Russell Wilson's going to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think what also helps Bryce Young is that he didn't necessarily play with wide receivers this past year. CJ Stroud played with Marvin Harrison Jr., who's going to be the top wide receiver in next year's draft.
Mm-hmm. And he had Jackson Smith and Jigba, and the other guy, Amuka Jigba, he's also going to be a first round pick next year from Ohio State. So he's going to have 2 first rounders next year, He had a first rounder this year. It's a
And
plus
two
that it worked.
first rounders with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. That would
Mhm.
be 5 first-round wide receivers.
It's really absurd the amount of wide receiver talent Ohio State has. It's another level.
Okay, and then maybe the the one guy who I think possesses the widest range, like you either love him or hate him, is Anthony Richardson because he only started 13 games at Florida. But yet we all saw his combine numbers when he ran full 40, jumped out of the gym, looked like a quarterback, different than Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. But is Anthony Richardson just an athlete, or can he develop into a really good quarterback?
That is the however much like $13 million question it's going to be or whatever
I
it
was
is.
going to say $64,000 question, like who wants to be a millionaire?
Right. It's just it's terrifying. You have to be willing to go all in with this guy and structure an offense, and that's going to highlight his skill set because he's completely raw. Like quarterbacks who have played this limited amount just don't succeed. Like you're talking 13 games. Like starting quarterback who plays in that championship, Mike Lee plays more games than that in a season, right? And this is Anthony Richardson's career. And I know he was behind Kyle Trask last year and other guys like that, but it's still just there's just massive question marks. But you see the tools and they translate. The guy is the best athlete on the field, not like in the position like on the field. When he steps on the field, he's legit the best athlete. So you're not going to be a better athlete than him. So he's always going to have that advantage. It's just if he can do the prototypical quarterback and be the guy you want. So whoever takes him, which could be the Seahawks, could be the Colts at 4, or he maybe slides a little bit farther than that. They're gonna have to structure an offense to like help him, and he'll likely sit just because he's so raw. You see some of these traits, like the game against Utah, everyone brings up, where he did everything perfectly good. He dominated that Utah team, which ended up being, I think they were top 15 in the year, but he did everything he wanted, and that's what you're hoping to see from him because you'll get a lot of these Cam Newton comps where he's just this freak athlete. But the thing is, Cam Newton was a way more developed player by the time he entered the league. That's why he threw for almost 4,500 yards as a rookie. You're not going to see that from Richardson. But he has the traits where he has good skills. He just needs to work on footwork a little bit. He has a cannon of an arm, and he's able to diagnose plays. You see him reading the defense, where it's not just one read and go. He'll like go to the second read and try to go to the third read before he scrambles and like runs. The one bonus with him is his avoidance rate of sack compared to pressures is like a Patrick Mahomes level. Like he doesn't get sacked because he's so good at using his athleticism to keep the play alive, and then he'll take off. So you're not going to get a Justin Fields where he's getting sacks 50, 60 times each year. It's just, yeah, it's a terrifying proposition, but the upside is you get the NFL like MVP of the league. So that's kind of the trade-off you take with Richardson.
But because he didn't start much in college, is Anthony Richardson a guy you would rather not play this year or even next year and just say, you know what, this guy, I'd rather develop you and then have you start maybe in 24 or 25.
Yeah, I think that depends on the situation he goes to. So he's going to go early, but if he goes to a team that does not have like the players around him to help him like be better, it's going to be a struggle. So I would prefer him to sit and say if there's a veteran starter, they bring in someone like a Teddy Bridgewater or whatever he can learn under and kind of develop his skills to where he's more polished. But if he has good players around him, like I would happily throw him out there as long as you're able to have him trust the reads and make the plays, and he has his footwork under control. I'd be fine throwing him out there. So I'd say it's very team dependent situation. If it's a good situation, we'll have to let him sit for a few games, then throw him in. Or if it's a team that's kind of a few years away from winning, then I would rather just rest him for this year and go for the next year.
So like Carolina drafting a number one's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, like they have like the line's not terrible, so it's okay, but you're just there's just not enough talent in Carolina. Like you got Adam Thielen now, but outside of that, it's Shai Smith, Laviska Chenault, like these guys.
Terrace Marshall.
Yeah, Terrace Marshall, the other guy. They're just not like unfortunately they're just not that good. So Anthony Richardson would have to carry that team. He'd have to do everything himself. And Thielen's a nice get, but like you're setting him up to fail at that point. It feels like.
And then Will Levis from Kentucky, because I see one problem with Will Levis. He's too big. Like he's too muscular.
Yeah, he's a tank. He's 6'4", like 230 or something. Like he's a big boy. The difference with Will Levis is this dude's old. He's 24. So he's not young. So and he has all these question marks around him still. He will go high. Like someone is going to draft him. He terrifies me more than Richardson because he should be more developed. But you see these things where you're like, man, aren't you supposed to be like a good, like you've been around. He had to transfer to get to Kentucky to start because he couldn't get the job for like Penn State. So it's like, what are you getting here? And I know the tools are there. He's got a great arm and he can do it. It's just more, he gets comped to Jay Cutler and it's super frustrating because he has the talent to make it work. It's just sometimes he just makes bonehead decisions where you watch the play and you're just like, what did you see there? Like, and this is coming from someone like myself who's no scout or anything like that, but like I see it. So I know how NFL evaluators are going to see this where they're just like, I don't know what this guy's doing. But then, of course, he makes a spectacular play 5 plays later where he just throws an absolute cannon. 45 yards, hits a guy like in step and just catches it perfectly. So you see the give and take with him. It's just he's a maddening like quarterback to scout. I would be terrified to draft him, honestly.
I mean, yeah, I mean, he's a big quarterback, but unlike Anthony Richardson, who I think can run, I'm afraid that Will Levis is almost too big. I
Yeah,
mean,
like
you
he's not.
remember who's the cool Jamarcus Russell almost felt too big when the Raiders took him in 07. And I
Yeah,
feel
he.
like if Will Levis could be one of those guys, I mean, we'll see. I mean, seems like Mel Kiper likes him, but I don't like
Mhm.
Will Levis more than other guys. I mean, if he's at the back half of the first round, I feel like that's better than a team taking him at like 10 or so.
Yeah, it would help him. It's just he constantly makes these poor decisions, and these are like reads. These aren't him just like making bad throws. These are just bad reads he makes, which is why his career to like touchdown interception ratio is so high. And it's hard to like fix those guys, especially someone that has been around as long as he has because he's been through the developmental process. Like he's supposed to be the senior, right? So like obviously someone's gonna have the ego to take him like, yeah, we can fix these issues. And hopefully they can because like he's extremely talented. That's not a question mark, but it's a big ball mystery with him. Like he worries me more than every other quarterback, like by far. Like he's number 4 for a reason because of that, just because he's got so many issues.
All right, so now we talk about your Seahawks, and it's rare that a playoff team goes into a draft with a top 5 pick, but you Seahawks do. You have the Seahawks right now have the number 5 and number 20 picks. So
Mhm.
I think there are a couple of needs for you Seahawks. One, edge rusher, because it seemed like every other Seahawk game I saw last year, you guys were playing shootouts, and two, even if you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I think a number 3 wide receiver wouldn't hurt. So, what would be your ideal draft scenario for the Seahawks? Because I've heard a lot of people say the Seahawks could take Anthony Richardson if he's there, because you've got Geno Smith there. He could sit behind Geno and then be ready to play in a couple years. And Pete Carroll's not afraid to take gambles. But do the Seahawks go edge rusher? Do they take Jalen Carter from Georgia? I mean, what is your ideal draft scenario with Seattle?
So the Seahawks play a 3-4, so Jalen Carter fits perfectly. So does Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, who's just this freak athlete. He's like 6'6", has an 86-inch wingspan, which I think set the NFL Combine record. Like these guys are just monsters that you put them in and they can make plays. Now Jalen Carter is a better prospect than the top guys that were last year, So he is tantalizing as heck. Like the things he can do on a field are just they blow your mind. But there's talk of either like Will Anderson possibly, depending on how the top 4 picks go. Like the Seahawks will have their choice of either one of those elite D linemen early, or they could go quarterback if they really want to go that route. I don't know if that's the best strategy for the Seahawks because they're nowhere near a top team like a San Francisco. Like they still have these issues. It's a good core, but they need interior help on both sides of the line, like the O line and the D line, because we were bottom of the league in hurry rates. Our pressure rates weren't good, and the Seahawks just didn't blitz, so they were heavily reliant upon those D linemen to create pressures and sacks, and they just didn't. So you need those guys to be game wreckers up front, and it's one of the worst D line units in the league. So please take one of them. I saw the Daniel Jeremiah mock where he had Jalen Carter going to 5, and then Jordan Addison at pick 20, which is a wide receiver out of USC. Now that's kind of 2 of the bigger needs that the Seahawks have, as you mentioned. So I was thrilled with that. They could go someone like Kalijah Cansey, who's an interior D lineman. He's kind of like reminds people of Aaron Donald, and they could take him at pick 20 if they wanted to go that route. If they go quarterback or just stock up on D linemen, but those are the major needs for the Seahawks. They need a little bit of help in the back end. Like they have the 2 corners locked down. They did kind of address it a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see. I know someone said like Christian Gonzalez possibly out of Oregon would be another great addition just because he's so good. But realistically, I hope they attack both sides of the ball. Like get the D lineman, get the O lineman, and then get a wide receiver. Like that's kind of the ideal scenario, really, because we have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, so it's just like hit those early and often, and hopefully build out from there.
I mean, Addison does look tempting because I feel like people didn't get a chance to see what he did. But I mean, you look at Tyree Wilson at 5, he's an uber freak. And if you look at it, if the Seahawks don't take a quarterback, if the big 3 of Stroud, Young, and Richardson all off the board, Seattle could very well end up with either Wilson, Anderson, or Carter, meaning you get one of the best defensive players in this draft. And I'm telling you, think Seattle nailed this draft last year, getting 2 bookend tackles and Tyreek Wooden. You imagine with 4 picks in the top, 4 of the top. What do you have? 4 of the top 50 picks.
Yeah,
Seattle could really get some key guys because Seattle's not going to have a top 5 pick presumably for the next few years unless all hell breaks loose.
right. That's kind of the more thing they want to focus on is because the way they structured Geno Smith's contract, it's really just a 1-year deal. They could get out of it after this year. So if they did find someone and they fall in love with that quarterback, they're likely never going to have that chance again in the next 5 years or so. So it's, do you take that gamble or do you trust Geno Smith, who was very good? It's just he had to carry the defense along with his offense, which is really difficult for any quarterback if you have to like make up for how bad your defense is. And we saw this against San Francisco in the playoffs. It turned into this like the scene from The Replacements where it just kept getting worse and worse for Keanu Reeves because one turnover and near the end zone, and then it just snowballed and you're just chasing because you didn't have the talent to make up the difference. So getting those premium edge rushers, and I know like someone like Carter or Wilson can play inside or outside on the line, they make a world of difference. So hopefully they go there and then take their favorite wide receiver pick 20. Like I would be all on board with that.
I think Seattle fans will like that too. You imagine DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and somebody else going on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Would be nice.
I would open up a few running lanes for Kenneth Walker.
Just a few.
So, quick dynasty question. What free agent or trade move do you think impacted for dynasty leagues? What free agency or trade acquisition do you think will have the biggest impact this year?
It's probably Darren Waller because he becomes the locked in like target earner #1 in New York. Like it's going to run through him and Saquon Barkley. You could say maybe Miles Sanders going to Carolina, but that offense is TBD at this point. We just don't know how it's going to look. And while he did have a 50 catch season as a rookie, he has been kind of stone hands, as they call him, as of late. So I'm going to lean Darren Waller just because he's going to dominate the targets and be the guy. So he should be a high impact tight end like he's been in the past. So it'll be exciting to watch him in New York. Yes, man.
I'm really intrigued to see what Justin Fields and DJ Moore do this year, because I think DJ Moore will help make Justin Fields a better quarterback, and I think Justin Fields' mobility will make DJ Moore a better player.
Yeah, DJ Moore's very good. He's just been stuck in the horribleness that has been the Carolina quarterback situation his entire career. So it's exciting to get him with a quarterback who has the traits that Justin Fields has. It's going to make Justin Fields like he has the potential to be the QB1 overall now. And it's just if they pass enough, DJ Moore will be a fantastic fantasy option. So hopefully they do. That's kind of what I'm hoping for with DJ Moore because I love his talent. He's one of the better wide receivers in the league.
When he keeps his head on straight, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the Bears are gambling that Justin Fields can play this year, but I mean, if Justin Fields plays this year, the Bears go in the next year's draft with 2-1s. It might not have to draft Caleb Williams or me.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what the Seahawks are doing this year. They'll be doing next year. Well, they'll be because they're going to add all that talent into the team. They're going to get better. So like next year is really the year where Chicago should be pushing into the playoffs to be a very good team. This is the year where they get a little bit closer and they'll be fringe, kind of like the Lions and like the Jags made the playoffs last year, but like they'll be kind of knocking on the door. And if a few things break right, then it could work out. But if it falls flat, then hey, guess what? You have an early first and potentially 2 early firsts with how Carolina does, where it's like, oh, guess what? You just got Caleb Williams, and then you just move on and you get the best quarterback process. It's like Andrew Luck pretty much, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool too. So they are set up very well. I will say that.
All right, Jesse, thanks for hopping on today. Hopefully, things are not sleeping since Seattle come draft night, and Pete Carroll and John Snyder keep reeling in young prospects.
Let's hope so. Thanks for having me on today.